Like it or not, for better or worse, more and more Arkansans are leaving the land for asphalt. Whether for economic advantage or simply a different lifestyle, the impact already is significant and it's almost certain to deepen. For those who choose to remain in place, what sort of place will be theirs? The obstacles and the opportunities of rural Arkansas coming up on a special edition of Arkansas Week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for an Arkansas Week special edition. Don't get us wrong. There is plenty right about rural Arkansas, plenty. And urban Arkansas has plenty of problems, plenty. But the issues facing our state's less populated regions, where 40% of our people live, well, that's our focus. Since this decade began, rural Arkansas overall has lost 11% of its residents, most of them gone to larger communities or cities. Those remaining tend to be older and less healthy. Their household incomes typically are smaller. In urban Arkansas, public school enrollment is up 11%. In rural Arkansas, it's down 7%. Stagnant or declining local tax collections complicate the outlook for local governments, local services. So for a closer look at the dynamics in play, three men closely involved with rural Arkansas. Dr. Mark Cochran is Vice President of the UA's Cooperative Extension Service. Dr. Mark Jansen is Chief Medical Officer for UAMS Regional Programs, and John Edwards is General Counsel and Economic Development Director of the Helena-West Helena Port Authority. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. Dr. Cochran, let's begin with you. In land mass, Arkansas is still overwhelmingly rural. I think of our 75 counties, if I'm counting correctly, only 13 are categorized by demographic data as urban. But the problems that rural Arkansas is looking at are, if I don't want to say forbidding, but they're profound.
Yes. As you indicated, that Arkansas in many ways is still a very rural state off of it, and there's a lot for our Arkansans, and 40 to 44% or so of our population live in our rural counties off of it. 62 of our 75 counties are categorized as that. They're there because they have an attachment to the land. They like the amenities that we're well known for nationwide as a natural state, their family connections. But there's also an awful lot of our rural Arkansans that have roots there that have chosen to move into the other areas of greater population concentration. So 47 of our 62 counties lost population in that time frame there.
At the top of your list, if you could identify the or a number one problem, what would it be facing rural Arkansas?
Well, I would start with jobs and higher incomes, but there's a list, a matrix of things that it's healthcare, it's schools, it's the amenities that a larger population base handle in terms of shopping, professional services, a lot of those areas. We also, one of the things that we lead the nation in is the number of Arkansans that live in one county and work in another county. The number of Arkansans that live in one county and get their health care in another county off of it. So it's a complex, but certainly jobs and economic opportunities are at the top of the list.
Dr. Jansen, when they leave rural Arkansas, when people leave rural Arkansas, leave anywhere, they take their taxes with them, usually, which on a per capita basis would seem to drive up the cost of delivering just elemental services such as public schools and health care.
When you're in a rural area, the problem is that as you have out-migration of population, out-migration of tax base, you also have out-migration, say, of heads and beds in hospitals and other healthcare facilities. And so the perception is that if you go someplace else, you might be able to get a better quality of care. And as you leave and take your care with you, what you leave behind are the remnant population. They tend to be older. They have more health problems. We have higher rates of obesity. We have issues on the low end of the age scale. Infant mortality rates tend to be higher. And so you lose tax base, you lose the ability to pay for your services, but at the same time, the criticality of the patients in those rural areas increases, so there's a real squeeze.
John Edwards.
I would like to go back to something that Dr. Cochran raised and go to a point in the report that I think needs to be hit with a big hammer. Infrastructure, to me, is the key driver for so much of what our future will be. Many rural communities, they don't have the necessary infrastructure to do well in the 21st century, and forget about anything else, but just where do we move to get the jobs, to keep the healthcare industry. And I'm very pleased that this particular report, and I read it, Dr. Cochran, on page 20 at the upper left-hand corner, it talks about infrastructure and the challenges, of course, how we pay for it.
So you go ahead and plug it, Doctor.
Yeah, I'd really like to call out our rural profiles and Dr. Wayne Miller and his team that puts this together. It's a compendium of county-level statistics that go through economics, the demographics, healthcare, a good, concise reporting of where we stand as a state and by county basis off of it. The infrastructure, too, if you think through what it is, it's transportation, it's bridges, it's healthcare, but let's not forget it's access to broadband technology and our internet. It's the linkages to our supply chains. So it's very comprehensive off of it. And it goes hand in hand with the skill sets that we need to have in our modern economy, whether it's agriculture, whether it's food manufacturing, whether it's a medical profession. It's all tied together, and that's one of the things that makes this so complex, and trying to sort through the opportunity for an individual county or community is what their best strategic path is going to be to success in the future.
Well, it just goes without saying that fewer and fewer people are necessary to farm, excepting, of course, seasonal factors, harvest time, for example. So, what are the prospects, what are rural Arkansas's prospects of building up non-farm employment?
Well, I think that there are different paths. If I can make a parallel to baseball, if you're looking at a pitcher, what pitch does he particularly need to be overall successful? Is it the fastball? Is it the curveball? Is it the split finger fastball and opportunities there? One of the things that our Extension Service does in working with communities is to go in and work with them on an assessment of what are their opportunities, what are their challenges, and what is the path forward. So I don't think it's going to be one size fits all off of it, but education is going to be a component of it. Some communities can build off of the quality of life that they have in outdoor activities, the hunting, the fishing, the golf, whatever you have there. Some it might be value added in agriculture. Some it might be our forestry and wood products industry. Some of it is going to be light manufacturing. But you've got to consider what that skill set is to run those factories. And a lot of the factories, if they come back, they're not going to have that demand for as many semi-skilled laborers. They're going to have a lower number of higher skilled workers there. So,
yeah, John Edwards.
I have a short example about going back to infrastructure, but where it relates to everything else that I think we all at this table want. 2015, Helena Harbor, Phillips County, we lost our rail service to the entire county. The Short Line Railroad, the Arkansas Midland Railroad that served us, they went on an embargo because of the condition of the tracks. That would have been devastating to our future, and it would have been devastating to the companies that we already had in Phillips County. I mean, we had a company that was going to leave if we did not get rail service restored. By working with the Delta Regional Authority, Arkansas Economic Development Commission, Governor Hutchison, and the railroad company, the Arkansas Midland Railroad, and their parent company, the Genesee and Wyoming, we came together within 6 months of a very comprehensive rebuild program of the track. the bottom line was we got the railroad opened. After the railroad got opened, we've had 3 new businesses that have come into Phillips County. They've employed close to 300 new jobs that we didn't have there before, and this is all since 2015. These things start making the difference when you have the people and you have the employment, and that's why I keep going back to all these things that we discussed today are important. But if you don't have the basic infrastructure, and I'm talking about the critical infrastructure in place, you never have the opportunity for these communities to have a pathway forward and look at new things. So I'm a big believer that if policymakers will stay focused, and this is another thing I like about the report, it sticks to some basic issues, repairing deficient bridges, making sure wastewater treatment facilities are fixed. If we really want to look at improving health, you give Arkansans good quality water, you make sure they have a healthy community to live in, to build upon. And I think that for our policymakers, if they will continue to focus on these things, it will pay handsome dividends in the future.
Dr. Mark Jansen, healthy communities are comprised of healthy people, and that's a problem.
It's a problem we'd like to think that we're trying to emphasize as we move forward in healthcare, addressing wellness rather than sickness, and that's a real problem, because the rural Arkansans will change the oil in their pickup trucks every 3,000 miles, but when you talk to them about, let's go check your blood pressure, let's check your cholesterol, there are all kinds of things that we know through evidence-based medicine that we know what we need to do to change the collective well-being and health of the population in general. A healthy workforce is required, but we've got some real challenges. One of those is that over 40% of primary care physicians in the state of Arkansas that are in the rural area are over the age of 60. And when you look at the demographics and who's coming behind them, that number falls off precipitously. So I'm going to tell you, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will have a substantial crisis in access to primary care physicians and providers. You look at hospitals. What's going on with hospitals? Helena has a 127-bed hospital, right? So back in the day, when so much of medicine occurred as an inpatient, that size hospital was very productive, had a lot of jobs, had a lot of patients. We say heads in beds. These days, medicine is changing. The idea that you're going to go in and stay in the hospital for a week for gallbladder surgery is long gone. So you have the outmigration of inpatient services stressing hospitals, and then you have the idea that we've got to have a healthier workforce, but a population that has yet to grasp the importance of wellness.
What I hear you say, all of you saying, is that urban Arkansas had better pay attention to rural Arkansas. But you mentioned the dynamics, the finances.
We are a state, right? And we need to look at the urban side and the rural side. And I think from a healthcare perspective, the rural side has real challenges because of the difficulty in recruiting, just as it's hard to recruit industry. They're all intertwined. If you don't have, I spent 30 years in Arkadelphia. Sun Paper, you were talking about it last week. So what is the possibility of Sun Paper even looking at Clark County if there's no hospital in Clark County? I would think zero. So you have to look at it as an economic development issue as well as health for the citizens.
Go ahead, Dr. Hawkins.
Yeah, I was just going to add that if you make comparisons to the national statistics, a lot of the issues that we're discussing about rural Arkansas, our urban centers are still well above national statistics as well. So our obesity is not just a rural problem. It transcends all of that. Now, sure, it's concentrated, and we have some real challenges on the rural side, but there's a lot of work to do across the state off of it, and it does all fit together as a package. That successes in our urban areas and successes in our rural areas are not going to be independent of one another. They have to be linked together for success of the state of Arkansas.
If for no other reason than because the delivery of, we have a couple of counties I know that have talked about, I think including your home county, John Edwards, have talked about the county governments are having difficulty making payroll because the tax base is diminishing.
And you're going to find this with county judges. You talk to county judges and quorum court members across the state, they're all facing that same challenge. I will say that to your point about what the urban areas of the state have to be concerned about, we are all in this together. The competition for jobs today is probably greater than it ever has been, as far as everyone trying to get the same company to come and locate in their facility. We cannot lose sight of the fact of what the internet, social media does about the marketing and the reputation of a community. And I think it ultimately gets back to, we all want the same things, whether we live in Little Rock, Arkadelphia, Helena, England, Arkansas. We want to have a good, safe quality of life. And when you have, and there are some communities in this state that I think do an excellent job of promoting themselves, through social media and things of that nature. But it all goes back to, people have to have a job. They have to have a place to work. And I think the communities in the future that will do well are the ones that help set the stage to provide a place where jobs can be created.
And let me add to that. If you look at the structure of today's households, it's not one job per household, it's 2 jobs per household. And you're not going to keep an employee in some of our rural areas if there's not a job for the spouse and you don't have the opportunities for the entire family. So it's the whole bundle of attractions into a particular area that you have there.
Recruiting providers to rural area, again coming back to the infrastructure, but also the school system. So if you're recruiting individuals of a high educational level and they're going to have a family, they're going to expect to have that opportunity for their children as well. So I think you have to look at the school systems, and one of the things that intrigues me in my research is trying to understand what Pottsville down the road does to be so high in the educational level, and what can other rural communities learn from other small towns that tend to have an excellent educational system, because they have a leg up on the recruitment of the providers of tomorrow. When you talk about industry, one other industry we need to talk about that's non-exportable is aging. So I want to shout out to Montgomery County. They've created a nursing home there. My mother-in-law's in it. It's one of the superb nursing homes in the state, and it creates county jobs that are competitive. People drive from DeQueen to Mount Ida to work. And so it's been a very successful model that I think other communities, particularly if they're struggling from a county standpoint, could look at actually getting involved in providing services to the aged. They have 2 knolls on a beautiful hill, and on one side it's an assisted living center, and the other side is a full-blown nursing home, and they are superb.
And I think that's one of the points that I'd like to reiterate, is that we need to look at the bundles that we have off of this, and they've got to all fit together off of it. And we need to, as you go through tailoring for a community or a county, look at the opportunities that you have, and oftentimes it's easier to grow or nurture an existing industry or opportunity than trying to get into the competition to bringing a new industry into an area.
Rather keep a customer than recruit a new one.
That's right.
All right. Your institution, Doctor, UMS, is launching, well, it's been working for 7 decades on putting more practitioners into rural areas. It's a big undertaking, given that a lot of physicians and their families, after all those years of schooling, they want to sit back and, I don't want to say relax, but they expect a certain level of amenities, of services. Quality of life is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I told you I was in Arkadelphia for just shy of 30 years, and the quality of life there was fine. I mean, it's got 2 4-year universities. I mean, it's a special community to me, but I think we've done a good job. Our regional campuses, we've been around since 1973. We have 810 doctors that have come through our different locations of training. We're in multiple cities that are primarily rural in the state. We're in 69 of 75 counties. We have been the engine that have created primary care providers for the state of Arkansas. So I think it's really an impressive record.
Arkadelphia, though, is that's a big little town.
It's 10,000, and you throw in another 6,000 college students.
And we're talking, though, about communities that are 500 people, 1,000, 2,000 people, and shrinking.
I think the answer to that is actually going to come. We talked about broadband availability, and as we're looking at the new world, using digital health and in particular telemedicine technology to reach out to these small communities, to provide them with state-of-the-art services that come from UAMS or Baptist or some of the other large, you're going to see a very granular integrated network that I think is going to be part, not all, but part of the answer to the need.
Yeah. At its core, I suppose we're talking about human capital. I mean, the land is fine. As my old friend Dr. Charlie Venus, the colleague of yours, said, there's nothing wrong with the Delta, for example, some of the best farmland on the planet. It simply doesn't need as many people as it used to do. So, assuming that those of John Edwards, of advanced education, some level of postgraduate, if they are continue to move toward the cities, they are leaving behind those with less social skills, less education, less job training.
Right.
Is that kind of a rearguard action you're fighting?
I think it goes back to, like in the case of where I work in Helena Harbor, it's getting the local leaders, and I think this is a key takeaway for me in my career, and I previously served in the late 1990s and early 2000s as the head of USDA Rural Development in Arkansas, so I worked all across this state. And I think it's incumbent upon mayors and city council members of no matter how small the city is, to them to really understand where they are in relationship to the quality of water they have, the kind of wastewater systems they have. I mean, these basic things, because if you have the basic building blocks in place, you can take the next step. I also think it's incumbent upon local elected leaders to understand that if your community is been struggling and you are behind, coming out of these problems will take time. You have to manage expectations. But going over things that we have here in the state, particularly in a lot of the Delta region that I don't think we talk about as much, we have one of the most abundant water supplies in America, in the Delta. People need water. At Helena Harbor, we landed a company in 2015 called Envirotech Chemical Services. They make biodegradable disinfectants for the food and the water industry. They came from California. Well, guess what? What's the problem they have in California? It's a shortage of water. We have to really do a better job of looking at what we have and how to exploit that to get people to come to us. It's not going to happen overnight. Our local elected officials have to be very realistic in how they portray what is possible, but I do think that when many of our communities can have a much, much brighter future if we will focus on those points. I have just seen over my career communities that I call it the bright shiny object thing. You know, they want to dangle, they look at something out there, but it's not going to deal with, like this report speaks to, critical infrastructure. You've got to get your basics down first. And I know that, you know, that may sound trite, but it has the virtue of being true. I mean, we would not be here in Conway, Arkansas today if the basic infrastructure for a thriving community was not in place, but it's here. And I think that's where we always have to go back to. You start with your building blocks and you go from there.
We've talked about local. It's got to start at almost granular, I guess is what does rural Arkansas need, whether it's the Delta or the foothills of the Ozarks or the woodlands of South Arkansas? What does rural Arkansas need from Little Rock? What does it need from Washington?
One thing that's always puzzled me in recent years is that, you know, our inability as a nation to have a major infrastructure program. When I was head of USDA Rural Development in the late 1990s in Arkansas, we had a fairly robust budget for things like drinking water systems, wastewater systems, you know, things of that nature, even programs for broadband. All of that has been cut way back. I think one of the best things for the administration and the Congress to do, if they really put together a robust infrastructure program for the critical pieces of infrastructure that we're talking about, I think we would all benefit from it. I think we would benefit from it from the health perspective and every other thing we can think about. That's what I think rural communities need.
Doctor?
Our Arkansas Rural Healthcare Partners, which is a conglomerate of 11 hospitals in the southeast part of the state, they're getting together to get their act together to circle the wagons and help protect services for those citizens. And they need all the help they can get from the state, and they need a lot of help from the federal. But that's going to be the future for small hospitals in the state, is they got to watch out for each other, not consider themselves competitors, but rather colleagues.
Dr. Cochran, you get the last word.
Infrastructure, including broadband access, education, and capital. And those are all ingredients that would help us, whether we're talking about small communities or across the state off of it. So,
Vital issues. Gentlemen, we thank you for helping us explore them. It's something we'll return to, and I hope you'll return as well.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and see you next time.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.